Can you tell the difference between the iPhone 13 Pro Max and iPhone 12 Pro Max? While these two look almost the same, the newer 13 Pro Max brings some big changes under the hood that might just make it the most exciting iPhone upgrade of all time. And there are two main reasons for that. First one is without a doubt the big increase in battery size, so that the 13 Pro Max can comfortably last to days between charges, and secondly, you get a 120Hz ProMotion display for buttery smooth scrolling that makes the experience so much better. Display and design. One of the most exciting new features on the iPhone 13 Pro Max is a display upgrade. The screen size and resolution are the same on both. You get a 6.7-inch OLED panel with a resolution of 1284 x 2778 pixels. But what's new is that Apple is finally introducing 120Hz ProMotion for smoother scrolling on the 13 Pro Max. The 12 Pro Max and previous iPhones run at 60 Hz, which simply means that the screen refreshes 60 times per second, which appears choppy in comparison to the 120Hz ones. The 13 Pro Max also has the advantage of a brighter display that can go up to 1000 nits max brightness, while the older model could only go up to 800 nits, which makes a difference when you use the phone outdoors. Both phones use Face ID, but on the 13 Pro Max the notch is 20% smaller in size. On the design side, no major changes, same flat sides, same overall look. However, the 13 Pro Max is a bit thicker and a bit heavier. That actually might be a bigger deal than it sounds. The 12 Pro Max was quite heavy at 228 grams, and the 13 Pro Max now is 240 grams. Are we reaching some sort of a limit here? It's definitely not the most comfortable feeling carrying this phone in your pocket. Both phones feature a stainless steel construction instead of the cheaper aluminum used on most other phones. You can tell the steel by the shiny, glossy sides, and that also happens to be one of the reasons for the added heft here on the front. Both phones use Apple's ceramic shield toughened glass, no difference in that regard, and both have sapphire cover glass for the camera lenses for increased scratch protection. There is also absolutely no difference in their practicality, with the same IP68 dust and water protection rating on the two. But then we have the new iPhone 13 Pro Max colors. Pro models never quite get the fun color options of the regular iPhone models, and the 13 Pro Max remains quite conservative for the most part, but it does have that new Sierra Blue version that actually looks really appealing. We have the graphite version up for review, and then you also have the bright silver model, and finally the gold one, which is more like pale champagne and also looks quite stylish. Battery and charging. All iPhone 13 models get some form of a battery boost compared to the previous generation. The iPhone 13 Pro Max gets the biggest one. The 13 Pro Max features a 4,352 mAh battery versus a 3,687 mAh cell on the 12 Pro Max. That's an increase of nearly 20%, which just so happens to provide the biggest leap in battery life on an iPhone since the iPhone 11 Pro Max. So what about battery life? Official numbers from the company say that on average, the iPhone 13 Pro delivers 2.5 hours battery life increase over iPhone 13 Pro Max. And just look at the official estimates for battery life while streaming video. iPhone 13 Pro Max 25 hours, iPhone 12 Pro Max 12 hours. Yes, that's double the battery life while streaming video, which sounds insane. The iPhone 13 Pro Max is crushing it on the web browsing test, and that is one of the highest scores among all devices that we have tested so far. You might have expected a drop in battery life with 120 Hz, but it's quite the opposite, as Apple has implemented the feature brilliantly. We are getting between 20% and 30% longer battery life in our tests, a really impressive showing. The new 13 Pro Max is also great at our YouTube video streaming test, where it managed to play back video non-stop for more than 10 hours, a first for an iPhone, and it beat the 8-hour 37-minute score on the 12 Pro Max. And last but not least, gamers will be happy to know that you get excellent battery life there too, as the score there also breaks the 10-hour mark. This compares to just 8 hours on the 12 Pro Max. On the wireless front, MagSafe is also still around with up to 15W charging speeds. That's unchanged. In our testing, using the Apple MagSafe charger, it took about 2 hours and 45 minutes to fully charge up an iPhone. And the magnets and their strength also hasn't changed on the 13 Pro Max. Cameras. While they look quite familiar, the three cameras on the iPhone 13 Pro Max are visibly bigger, and the reason for that lies in the all-new and bigger sensors that they use. First though, here is a quick camera comparison with the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Wide main camera, 26mm on both, f1.5 aperture on 13 Pro Max versus f1.8 aperture on 12 Pro Max. Ultra-wide camera, 13mm on both, f1.8 aperture on 13 Pro Max versus f2.4 aperture on 12 Pro Max. Telephoto camera, 3x zoom, or 77mm on 13 Pro Max versus 2.5x zoom on 12 Pro Max. Apple advertises that the iPhone 13 Pro Max wide camera now captures up to 2.2x more light at night for both photos and videos, and the ultra-wide camera gets up to 92% more light, which sounds massive. That advantage comes from the larger sensors used. The main camera on the 13 Pro Max features a 1.1.65 sensor versus a 1.1.9 sensor on the 12 Pro Max. But let's take a look at the actual photographs. During the day, there is hardly any difference at all and photos look pretty much identical. But what about the low light performance? Interestingly, the newer phone captures slightly darker photos for a moodier, more genuine nighttime feel. Notice the flaring from the lights that is quite annoying. It's still present in photos. The larger sensor and wider aperture allowed the iPhone 13 Pro Max to use night mode with merely a 1-second exposure compared to a 3-second exposure on the iPhone 12 Pro Max. And such low light, even though we tapped on the native 3x zoom on the 13 Pro Max and 2.5x zoom on the 12 Pro Max. Both phones actually use the main camera with digital zoom and night mode in the photo above. You can now also capture macro photos on the iPhone 13 Pro Max thanks to the new ultra-wide camera that has a new autofocus system that allows to focus at a distance as close as just 2 centimeters for incredible close-ups. This same feature applies for video too, where you can record macro video. New Apple A15 chip. Apple has the lead in performance in the smartphone space, and the new Apple A15 Bionic chip in the iPhone 13 Pro Max raises the bar from the previous leader, which just so happens to be the Apple A14 in the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Both chips are built on 5nm technology, but the newer one features more transistors and a wider cache, and it gets improvements in CPU, GPU, and AI performance, plus it brings very crucial camera ISP enhancements. So far, it is said that Apple has bumped the CPU frequency up from 2.99 GHz on the A14 to 3.22 GHz on the A15, which gives an under 10% increase in CPU performance, and the company has also boosted the cache, which helps get better multi-core performance. Our take on these numbers is that the A15 is faster. But the A14 was already fast enough, so don't expect some huge difference in the way these phones run in real life. This is more of a future-proofing move, rather than addressing any particular problem. Unless you edit a lot of video on your phone, that definitely feels much quicker now. On the GPU side, we are seeing slightly bigger gains. The new iPhone Pros with the Apple A15 Bionic scored 14,216 points on the Geekbench Metal Graphics test compared to 9,123 for the iPhone 12 family and 7,338 points for the iPhone 11 series. That's nearly 55% improvement, a bigger leap than you might have expected. But in more realistic testing cases such as the 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme test that simulates 3D gaming, we see more modest gains in actual GPU speeds. The iPhone 13 Pro Max also has the same 6GB of RAM as the previous model. That falls short of Android flagships but seems sufficient for the way iOS runs. On the network side, you have 5 grams connectivity with support for mmWave in the US, as well as mid-band and low-band 5 grams, so you can get the full benefits of 5 grams. The iPhone 13 series also used the new Qualcomm's X60 modem, a welcome upgrade over the X55 modem used in the iPhone 12 series. The iPhone 12 Pro Max is powered by Apple's A14 Bionic chip, while the 13 Pro Max features the newer A15 chip. If you play video games or stream a lot of content on your phone, you might appreciate the iPhone 13 Pro Max's faster refresh rate and smoother scrolling interface. And here is a detailed specs comparison between the iPhone 13 Pro Max and iPhone 12 Pro Max. For more informative videos, please subscribe Info of Tech.